We were certain we understood the universe. For 10,000 cycles, the Galactic Concord cataloged every known species with cold precision: mass, strength, aggression thresholds, extinction probability. We believed chaos could be reduced to numbers. We believed survival followed rules. And by those rules, humans should never have mattered. I was there when their file was first presented. A small, blue-green world on the edge of an unremarkable star system. Volatile climate, weak gravity, soft-bodied inhabitants with no natural armor, no claws, no fangs worthy of record. Their average lifespan was laughably short by our standards. Their emotional volatility was flagged as a weakness. Their tendency toward internal conflict was noted with mild amusement. The chamber laughed. I remember the sound clearly. Dozens of species, each more ancient and powerful than the last, sharing a moment of shared superiority. Humans were assigned a low-risk designation, non-threatening, peripheral, useful perhaps as labor or cultural curiosities, certainly not contenders. I signed that assessment myself. In hindsight, that is the mark that still burns. At first, the data supported our arrogance. Humans fractured politically, they argued, they fought among themselves with crude weapons. Entire civilizations rose and fell in the time it took some of us to complete a single generational cycle. We mistook noise for weakness. We mistook inefficiency for fragility. What we did not measure, what we could not, was endurance. There were anomalies, of course. There are always anomalies before catastrophe. Humans survived environments that should have killed them. They adapted not by changing their bodies, but by refusing to accept limits. They bled and continued. They lost and continued. They failed repeatedly and still continued. Our model struggled to account for that. Psychological resilience was difficult to quantify, pain tolerance even more so. Humans exhibited a disturbing tendency to function through trauma rather than around it. Where other species withdrew, humans advanced. Where others broke, humans hardened. Still, we dismissed it. Statistical noise, one analyst said. Cultural bravado, another suggested. I agreed with them, because agreement was comfortable. The first real warning came not from a battlefield, nor from a diplomatic crisis, but from education reports. Human juveniles displayed an unsettling response to stress. Bullying did not always produce submission. Isolation did not always result in collapse. Sometimes, rarely but significantly, it produced focus, silence, control. We noted it, then we ignored it, because no one fears a species that cries openly. No one fears creatures who mourn their dead, who bond deeply, who feel too much. Emotion, we believed, was a flaw evolution would eventually correct or eliminate. We did not realize emotion was their fuel. I look back now at the footage, the transcripts, the early warnings buried beneath 1,000 other files, the refusal to kneel, the way humans protected their young with a ferocity that bordered on madness, the way even their weakest would step between danger and another without hesitation. We should have understood then. Instead, we approved cultural exchange programs, shared academies, neutral zones where our children would learn diplomacy together. We believed proximity would soften them, civilize them. What it did was give us a front-row seat. Because the moment that shattered our certainty did not occur in a war hall or a council chamber. It occurred in a corridor, brightly lit, supervised, mundane, a place where no one expected history to be rewritten. One human child, one alien child, a brief lapse in oversight, a single mistake. We thought strength came from claws and plasma. We learned too late it came from something far worse. And the galaxy has been paying for that lesson ever since. Earth should never have produced a spacefaring species. That was the first conclusion reached by every independent survey team that studied the planet. I have read those reports countless times since. I know their language by memory now. Volatile biosphere, unstable tectonics, erratic climate cycles, excessive predator density, a world in constant motion, forever attempting to destroy whatever dares to live upon it. Most civilizations arise from balance. Earth was born from chaos. Its land masses drift and collide, birthing mountains through violence. Its oceans churn with storms large enough to swallow continents. Temperature extremes fluctuate wildly,
sometimes within the same rotation cycle. Even the planet's own gravity conspires against fragile life, pulling relentlessly, wearing bodies down over time. On such worlds, life usually simplifies or fails. Humans did neither. What disturbed us most was not that humans survived Earth, but how they did so. They did not evolve hardened exoskeletons or redundant organs. They did not grow claws, venom, or natural armor worth recording. Their bodies remained soft, vulnerable, easily damaged. Instead, something else changed. Humans learned to endure. Where other species adapted physically to their environment, humans adapted internally. Their nervous systems recalibrated pain. Their minds normalized fear. Their social structures transformed suffering into shared purpose. Injury did not signal retreat, it signaled escalation. This defied every survival model we possessed. Pain, to most sentient life, is a deterrent. To humans, it became information. Fear became a tool. Loss became memory, and memory became motivation. They carried trauma forward not as a weakness, but as reinforcement. Even their predators learned this lesson. Earth's fauna is aggressive. Teeth, claws, poison, speed. Every evolutionary horror refined across millions of cycles. Yet humans hunted them, studied them, dominated them.
Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to stop once the cost became unbearable. This trait manifested early. Human juveniles are subjected, intentionally or not, to constant stress. Competition is embedded into their education systems. Failure is frequent. Social hierarchies are fluid and often cruel. From an alien perspective, their schooling appears inefficient at best, abusive at worst. We watched recordings of human children placed under academic pressure, social scrutiny, and emotional conflict simultaneously. We observed ridicule, exclusion, and challenge treated as normal developmental experiences. Many of our analysts were horrified. One asked, the answer, we later realized, is simple and terrifying because it works. Human children do not break as expected. Some do, yes, no species is without loss, but many adapt. They harden selectively. They learn when to endure, when to resist, and when to strike back. They develop emotional bonds of extreme intensity, loyalty forged under pressure rather than comfort. Stress for humans is a forge. We misunderstood this completely. To us, childhood is sacred and protected. Conflict is delayed until maturity. Aggression is controlled, filtered, ritualized. We believed this made us civilized. Humans believed something else, that survival does not wait for adulthood. By the time a human reaches maturity, they have already faced rejection, loss, competition, and failure repeatedly. Their psychological immune systems are robust, over-engineered, capable of absorbing punishment far beyond what their bodies suggest they should withstand. And yet, despite all this, humans remained empathetic. This contradiction disturbed me the most. A species forged by suffering should have been cruel. Instead, humans formed deep emotional attachments. They protected their young obsessively. They mourned their dead publicly. They extended compassion even to rivals, until a line was crossed. That line mattered. Our error was assuming that visible softness implied harmlessness. We saw their tears and thought weakness. We heard their laughter and thought naivete. We mistook emotional expression for lack of control, when in truth it was the release valve for something far more dangerous: containment. When humans finally left Earth, they did not shed these traits. They carried them into the stars, into mixed species habitats, into neutral colonies and shared institutions designed under entirely different assumptions. We built academies meant to teach diplomacy, restraint, and unity, calm environments where young minds could learn cooperation without fear. For most species, this was ideal. For humans, it was merely quieter than home. Their children arrived already trained in endurance, already familiar with hierarchy, pressure, and injustice, already capable of identifying when a situation was becoming dangerous, even if no one else noticed. We did not notice either. The warning signs were there.
Minor altercations dismissed as cultural misunderstandings. Reports of human juveniles responding to provocation with unnerving calm. Teachers remarking on their intense focus during crises. Still, nothing seemed significant. After all, what threat could a soft-bodied child pose among the offspring of apex species? What harm could arise in a brightly lit corridor, under surveillance, in a school designed for peace? History, it seems, favors irony. because the confrontation that would redefine humanity's place in the galaxy did not announce itself with alarms or weapons fire. It looked small. It looked trivial. It looked like nothing worth recording. And that is why no one stopped it until 30 seconds later, when it was already too late. The Neutral Academy was meant to be proof that we had evolved beyond instinct. It floated in stable orbit above a garden colony, its architecture all clean lines and transparent corridors, nothing hidden, nothing sharp. Every surface was designed to soothe, every schedule optimized for harmony. The Concord called it a triumph, a place where the children of 1,000 worlds would learn cooperation before prejudice could take root. I believed that once. I studied there. From the first cycle, the hierarchy revealed itself, not by decree, but by gravity. Apex species gathered naturally at the center of social space, their presence unquestioned. Herbivorous and diplomatically inclined species orbited them, eager, compliant. At the edges were the rest, the quiet, the small, the tolerated. The humans lived there. They were not isolated officially, that would have violated Concord statutes. Instead, they were placed near others, but never with them. Shared classrooms, separate circles, shared corridors, separate laughter. It was subtle enough to be deniable, persistent enough to effective. Humans were underestimated in ways so routine we no longer noticed. They were physically unimpressive compared to the dominant youths, shorter, lighter, slower. Their lack of natural weapons made them appear unfinished, like prototypes released too early. Their emotional expressiveness was mocked openly. Tears, anger, visible frustration, these were seen as failures of discipline. I am ashamed to say I laughed too. Among the Apex students, one stood above the rest. He was everything our civilization admired, tall, broad, armored by nature itself. His species had never known conquest because none dared challenge them. Strength radiated from him effortlessly. Authority followed like a shadow. Teachers favored him unconsciously. Peers deferred instinctively. He learned early that rules bent around him. He was not cruel in obvious ways. That would have drawn attention. Instead, he practiced dominance through proximity, standing too close, blocking paths, taking objects without asking. Displays subtle enough to be dismissed as misunderstandings. The humans noticed. One human in particular. She was small even by their standards. Quiet.
Always watching. Her posture was relaxed, her movements economical. She spoke rarely, and when she did, it was softly. Many mistook that for fear. It was not fear. She sat near the back of shared lectures, recording everything with meticulous care. Her academic performance was unremarkable, not poor, not exceptional, invisible. I remember thinking she lacked ambition. What she possessed, I would later understand, was awareness. The Apex youth targeted her gradually. At first, it was accidental contact in crowded corridors. A shoulder clipped, a dat pad knocked on her hands. Laughter followed, never directly aimed at her, always plausible. Teachers looked up, saw nothing overt, and returned to their work. Cultural clumsiness, one instructor said. Spatial differences, another added. We accepted these explanations eagerly because they required no action. The human girl never reacted as expected. She did not protest loudly. She did not escalate. She retrieved her belongings, adjusted her course, and continued. Each time, calm, controlled, observant. That unsettled me, though I did not yet know why. As cycles passed, the contact increased. Comments whispered just out of translation range. Insults wrapped in humor. Invitations that were not invitations at all. Tests of boundary disguised as play. Still, she endured. Other humans noticed too. I saw it in their eyes, the tightening focus, the subtle repositioning. But none intervened. Not yet. Human restraint is deliberate, calculated. They do not act at the first violation. They wait. The Academy's surveillance logs show nothing remarkable during those days. No spikes in aggression, no formal complaints, no policy breaches. Everything functioned as designed. That is the most damning indictment of all. Because systems that prioritize harmony often fail to recognize danger until it disrupts the aesthetic. The moment itself arrived without ceremony. A routine transition between learning blocks. Students filled the main corridor, voices echoing softly against the polished walls. I was there, speaking with peers, half attentive. The Apex youth approached from behind the human girl, his posture loose, confident. This time it was not an accident. His hand reached out. Contact was made where it should not have been, lingering, possessive, deliberate. A gesture meant to assert ownership in front of witnesses. A statement, not a mistake.
The corridor did not fall silent. Conversations continued. Laughter persisted. No alarm sounded, no teacher turned in time. The galaxy did not notice. But something changed. The human girl stopped moving. Not froze, stilled. Her breathing slowed, her posture aligned. In that fraction of a second, I saw a transformation so subtle most missed it entirely. Her eyes focused, not on his face, but on angles, distance, balance, assessment. I felt it then, a pressure in my chest I could not explain.
An instinct older than intellect whispered that a line had been crossed and that consequences were no longer theoretical. The apex youth smiled. He believed the moment belonged to him. Behind him, the human girl's hand began to rise, and somewhere deep within the Academy's perfect systems, something irrevocable shifted, because for the first time, human restraint was about to end. There is a moment just before disaster when the universe seems to pause. I did not understand that at the time. I only remember the sensation, an unnatural stillness, as if sound itself hesitated. The corridor remained bright, orderly, alive with casual conversation. Students passed in clusters. Laughter echoed. Nothing looked wrong. Everything was wrong. The apex youth's hand rested on the human girl's shoulder. Not a shove, not an accident, a grip. It was deliberate, possessive, and performed for an audience. His fingers curled with practiced confidence, asserting ownership rather than force. Around them, a few students noticed and smirked. Some laughed openly. To them, it was a familiar display. Dominance reaffirmed, hierarchy maintained. The human girl did not cry out. She did not pull away. She did not look at him. For half a second, she did nothing at all. That is when I should have known. I had studied predators on a dozen worlds. I had watched creatures coil before striking, had seen the stillness that precedes violence. What I saw then carried the same signature, but it came from something soft, small, and utterly underestimated. Her shoulders lowered. Her breathing slowed. The corridor noise dimmed, not because it stopped, but because my attention narrowed to her. The human girl's face changed, not into anger, not into fear, but into something far colder. Focus, calculation, a switch thrown inward. The apex youth laughed. "Relax," he said, his translator rendering the word in a tone meant to reassure witnesses while humiliating her. His grip tightened slightly, just enough to remind her, and everyone watching, of the difference between them. That was the last mistake he ever made. The human girl moved. Not away. Into him. What happened next unfolded in less than 30 seconds, yet my memory stretches it into fragments. Each motion burned into me with painful clarity. She rotated under his arm, not struggling against his strength but redirecting it. Her foot slid back, anchoring her weight. Her shoulder dipped. Her hand snapped upward, striking not with power but precision, targeting a joint, a nerve cluster we had catalogued but never imagined a human child would exploit. There was a sound. A sharp, wet crack that did not belong in a school. The apex youth's laughter cut off mid-breath. His grip loosened as his arm failed him, not torn away, not beaten down, but disabled. His body reacted before his mind could, staggering as balance abandoned him. Confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by pain. The human girl did not stop.
She stepped forward, inside his reach, where his size meant nothing. Her movements were efficient, almost instructional. Elbow, knee, a pivot that placed his mass off-center. Another sound, deeper this time, accompanied by a scream that finally drew attention. Students recoiled. Conversations died. Someone shouted. I stood frozen. This was not a brawl. It was not chaos. It was not rage. It was execution of intent. The apex youth attempted to strike back, but his limbs betrayed him. The girl had taken away his options methodically. Each movement closed a door. Each strike removed a possibility. He fell to one knee, then both, his body too shocked to process what was happening to it. The human girl grabbed his collar, not to lift him, but to steady him. That, more than anything, horrified me. She looked into his eyes then, not with hatred, not with triumph, with something closer to warning. Her mouth moved, but I could not hear her words over the pounding in my auditory canals. Then she let him go. He collapsed. The corridor erupted into noise, screams, alarms, panicked voices overlapping in a chaotic wave. Someone activated emergency protocols. Teachers rushed forward, their authority suddenly meaningless. Medical drones descended, scanners flashing urgently. The Apex youth lay curled on the floor, gasping, his body twisted unnaturally. Bones had fractured, ligaments torn, pain signals overloaded his nervous system. He was alive, but broken in ways that would never fully heal. And the human girl stood above him. She was shaking, not with fear, with restraint. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her breathing was controlled but ragged, as if she were forcing something back inside herself. Tears welled in her eyes, not from regret, but from effort, from the immense pressure of stopping. Security arrived then, weapons raised, uncertain where to aim. For one surreal second, the human girl turned toward them, and every guard flinched. She did nothing. She raised her hand slowly, compliantly. The transformation reversed as quickly as it had appeared. Her posture slumped, her eyes lost their sharpness. She looked suddenly small again, young, vulnerable, harmless. Teachers rushed back, voices overlapping with rehearsed concern. She answered none of them. Instead, she looked at the Apex youth being lifted onto a stretcher. Their eyes met once more. Something unspoken passed between them, a final lesson delivered without words. I realized then that she had spared him. That thought chilled me more than anything else I had witnessed. Reviewing the footage later did not help. We slowed it down, analyzed angles, measured force. Experts debated how a human juvenile could incapacitate a physically superior opponent so completely. They asked the wrong question. The correct one was simpler. Why didn't she do worse? Because she could have. Humans do not explode in violence blindly. That is the myth we believed.
What they do instead is contain it, layer upon layer of control built from years of pressure, stress, and restraint. When released, it is not sloppy, it is not uncontrolled. It is terrifyingly focused. 30 seconds ended a lifetime of arrogance. The Academy never recovered its innocence. Students avoided humans afterward, or watched them with new caution. Teachers enforced rules more strictly, but their confidence was gone. Something fundamental had cracked. As for me, I stood among the witnesses, my worldview in ruins. I had seen strength before. I had seen brutality. I had even seen war. But I had never seen mercy born of power. That day, I learned the truth we had ignored for centuries. Humans are not weak. They are restrained. And once you force them to let go, there is no lesson the galaxy will ever forget. Silence settled over the Academy like fallout. Not the clean quiet of scheduled rest cycles or enforced meditation hours, but a heavy, unnatural stillness that pressed against every corridor and classroom. Conversations resumed eventually, but they were muted, careful, fragmented. Laughter vanished first. Confidence followed. We all pretended nothing had changed. It was a lie no one believed. The official response was swift and sterile. Emergency reviews were convened, security protocols updated, counselors deployed. The incident was labeled an altercation, a word chosen to sand down its edges and make it fit inside policy. Administrators spoke of misunderstanding, of cultural friction, of unfortunate escalation. No one spoke of fear. Medical reports circulated quietly among faculty and research staff. I read them under authorization I no longer deserved. The data disturbed our experts more than the footage had. The injuries were severe, yes, but what unsettled them was the pattern. Bones fractured at structurally vulnerable points, ligaments damaged in ways that reduced future mobility without risking immediate fatality. Neural trauma consistent with overload, not destruction. Nothing excessive, nothing random. Efficiency, not brutality. She could have killed him, one medic whispered during a closed review. That choice echoed louder than any scream. The human girl was summoned before the Academy Council. She arrived accompanied by instructors and a human liaison, her posture straight, her gaze lowered respectfully. There were no signs of defiance, no pride, no triumph. When asked to explain her actions, she did not justify them. She apologized. The word translated cleanly across every language matrix, regret expressed for harm caused. She acknowledged the rules, accepted responsibility. She did not accuse, she did not retaliate verbally, she did not demand understanding. That frightened me more than the violence itself. Predators boast, victors posture, monsters revel. She did none of those things. Her apology was not weakness, it was discipline, the same discipline that had stopped her 30 seconds sooner than instinct demanded.
the same control that had prevented her from turning dominance into annihilation. The Apex youth survived, though his recovery was long and incomplete. He was removed from the academy under medical exemption. His social power evaporated overnight. No one spoke his name aloud anymore. The humans noticed. They did not celebrate. Human students returned to class quietly, their routines unchanged, their expressions neutral. Yet something had shifted in the way they moved through shared spaces. They no longer avoided eye contact. They no longer yielded corridors automatically. They occupied space without apology. No threats were made. None were needed. I began to watch them closely then, all of them. The athletes, the scholars, the quiet ones, the loud ones. I looked past their varied exteriors and saw the same underlying structure, a tension held in check, a readiness coiled beneath layers of social restraint. Each human carried it differently. Some buried it under humor, others under empathy, many under silence. But it was there. They endured slights that would have provoked other species into open conflict. They absorbed microaggressions with practiced patience. They did not escalate when tested. Until a line was crossed. Fear spread through the academy, not as panic, but as recalibration. Apex species no longer shoved humans aside casually. Instructors intervened sooner. Surveillance focused more intently on interactions involving human students. Respect arrived belatedly, awkward and uncertain. The humans accepted it without comment. What troubled me most was how little changed on their side. No grand displays, no declarations of strength, no attempts to dominate in return. They continued as they always had, studying, forming bonds, protecting one another quietly, as if this had never been about power at all. I realized then that we had misunderstood human escalation entirely. They do not seek to win conflicts. They seek to end them, permanently if necessary, efficiently, with minimal collateral, unless forced otherwise. Violence, to them, is not expression. It is resolution. That understanding crept into the Academy's collective consciousness slowly, like a toxin with no antidote. Every species adjusted its behavior around humans, not because of explicit threat, but because of possibility. The knowledge that beneath the softness lay something final. The girl herself faded back into obscurity. She received counseling, monitoring, probation. She complied with every condition. Her academic record remained unremarkable. She never spoke publicly about the incident. Once, I passed her in a corridor weeks later. Our eyes met briefly. There was no recognition there, no memory of dominance or fear, only tiredness, and something like sorrow for what she had been forced to reveal. In that moment, I understood the greatest danger humans pose to the galaxy. Not their strength, but their willingness to keep it hidden.
Because a species that does not advertise its power does not seek conquest. It seeks boundaries. And when those boundaries are violated, the response is not loud, not prolonged, not theatrical. It is brief, decisive, and irreversible. The Academy learned that lesson in silence. The galaxy would learn it next. The footage reached the Galactic Council within 3 cycles. That in itself was unprecedented. Incidents at educational institutions were typically handled locally, buried beneath layers of protocol and discretion. This one bypassed every buffer. It was flagged, escalated, and delivered directly to the highest deliberative body in known space, with a priority marker I had only seen used twice before, both times preceding war. I was summoned as a witness. The council chamber was vast, carved from vacuum-hardened stone and lit by 1,000 floating glyphs. Representatives from apex civilizations filled the upper tiers, their presence dominating the space through sheer mass and gravity. Lesser species occupied the rings below. Humans, notably, were absent. They were the subject, not the audience. The footage began without commentary, frame by frame, slowed to a fraction of real time, every angle synchronized. Biometric overlays bloomed across the air, heart rates, muscle engagement, stress indicators, neural spikes. The council watched in silence as the corridor scene unfolded again, stripped of emotion and reduced to data. At first, there was scoffing. She exploited a structural weakness, one military analyst said dismissively. A lucky angle, another added. Then the experts began to speak. A biomechanical specialist highlighted leverage ratios.
A neurophysicist traced the timing of strikes to pain response delays. A behavioral analyst pointed out something no one else had noticed, the absence of adrenaline spike in the human girl until after the conflict had ended. She was calm, the analyst said quietly. Arguments erupted. Some claimed the incident proved nothing beyond individual anomaly. Others insisted it was evidence of covert taming. A few demanded sanctions, isolation, even removal of humans from mixed species environments entirely. The debate spiraled until an elder representative from one of the oldest civilizations raised a single limb. Silence fell instantly. That elder had survived 3 galactic collapses. When they spoke, species listened. "You are asking the wrong question," the elder said. "You ask how a human child defeated a superior opponent. That is trivial." No one answered. The elder gestured, and the footage resumed, this time jumping to the final seconds, the moment where the human girl steadied her opponent instead of finishing him, the moment she chose restraint over certainty. "That," the elder continued, "is not the behavior of a warrior species. Warriors escalate, conquerors dominate." The elder's eyes swept the chamber. That was the moment the classification changed. Not officially at first.
Not in the public registry, but in the sealed annex, where real decisions are recorded, humanity's designation was rewritten. No longer categorized under emerging militarized species, no longer filed among potential aggressors. A new term was introduced: limit breakers. Species that do not optimize for dominance, but for survival beyond predicted thresholds. Species whose defining trait is not strength, but refusal. Refusal to submit, refusal to collapse, refusal to accept imposed limits, biological, psychological, or moral. The implications were profound. Council simulations were rerun with updated parameters. Human responses were modeled under escalating provocation. The results were inconsistent, erratic, impossible to stabilize. Where other species followed predicted curves, retreat, surrender, extinction, humans diverged wildly. In many scenarios, they absorbed losses far beyond acceptable margins. In others, they responded with sudden, overwhelming force that ignored traditional cost-benefit analysis entirely. "They don't optimize for survival of the species," one strategist muttered in disbelief. Another corrected them. That frightened the council more than any fleet ever could. Emergency doctrines were drafted in record time. Mixed species education protocols were rewritten. New training modules on human boundary recognition were mandated for diplomats and military officers alike. A single directive appeared repeatedly across documents, highlighted in warning red. Do not corner humans. Do not humiliate them publicly. Do not threaten their young. Each line was based on observed behavior, not speculation. School policies changed first: increased supervision, zero tolerance for physical dominance displays, human liaisons embedded in every major institution. On the surface, it looked like protection. In reality, it was containment. Military planners fared no better. War games involving humans devolved into paradox. Traditional deterrence failed. Escalation models collapsed. Humans did not respond proportionally. They responded contextually. They endured until they did not. And when they did not, there was no reliable way to predict the scale of their response. One admiral summarized it best during a closed session: "You cannot threaten humans into submission." The council adjourned with no celebration, no declarations of victory or unity. There was only unease, a sense that something long ignored had finally been acknowledged, far too late. As I departed the chamber, I realized the most disturbing truth of all. The humans had done nothing new. They had not changed their behavior. They had not issued warnings. They had not postured or demanded recognition. They continued exactly as before, forming alliances, educating their young, expanding cautiously into the stars. It was we who had changed. We began to watch them closely, to adjust our language, to reconsider our assumptions. Fear crept into our policies, under the guise of respect.
Because deep down, the galaxy understood something it did not yet dare to say aloud. We had spent centuries provoking a species we did not understand, a species that does not seek conflict, but once pushed beyond moral boundaries, does not stop at victory. It stops at resolution. And the galaxy, for the first time in its long history,
began to wonder whether it had already crossed a line it could never uncross. It is not human violence that terrifies us. If that were all, the galaxy would know how to respond. Violence is familiar. It follows patterns. It announces itself with raised voices, mobilized fleets, and clear lines drawn in space. We have fought wars for longer than humans have recorded history. We understand anger. What we do not understand is restraint. After the Council's reassessment, I was assigned to a multidisciplinary analysis group tasked with answering a single question. Why did one small incident provoke such unease across civilizations that had survived extinction events without flinching? The answer did not lie in anatomy or tactics. It lay in human psychology. Humans protect the vulnerable with a ferocity that defies logic. Their social bonds are not conveniences, they are commitments. A human will endure humiliation, pain, even loss of status without retaliation, until someone weaker is threatened. Then the calculus changes instantly. This is not morality as we define it. It is instinct layered with ethics, reinforced by culture. We observed this repeatedly. In conflict simulations, humans tolerated personal harm far beyond expected thresholds. Insults, injuries, deprivation, these registered as noise. But introduce a child, a dependent, or an innocent third party, and the response curves spiked violently. Both were correct. Humans escalate only when necessary, but their definition of necessity is not survival of self, it is preservation of others. This makes them uniquely dangerous. You cannot predict their breaking point by targeting them directly. You reach it by threatening what they care about. And once that line is crossed, humans do not posture. They act. There are no extended warnings, no ceremonial challenges, no opportunities for de-escalation once moral certainty is achieved. The decision is internal, silent, and final. Action follows immediately, often with terrifying efficiency. This is why the Academy incident unsettled us so deeply. The human girl did not fight to win. She fought to stop. She applied only as much force as required to end the violation, and then she disengaged. That level of control is rare even among our most disciplined warriors. Empathy plays a role here that many of us find deeply uncomfortable. Human empathy is not passive. It does not merely feel, it identifies. Humans imagine themselves in the place of others with alarming clarity. They experience perceived injustice as if it were happening to them personally. This amplifies their response.
Empathy fuels their violence when boundaries are crossed, because to them, allowing harm to continue is participation in it. Inaction becomes guilt. Restraint becomes complicity. We optimized our civilizations for comfort. Humans optimized for survival. That difference explains everything. Comfort cultures prize stability. They avoid conflict, smooth friction, and suppress volatility. Over time, this produces societies that function beautifully under ideal conditions and collapse when those conditions fail. Humans never had ideal conditions. Their homeworld punished complacency relentlessly. Disease, disaster, scarcity, and predators ensured that no generation forgot how fragile existence was. Human systems evolved to absorb shock, not eliminate it. Failure was expected. Recovery was mandatory. This philosophy permeates everything they do. They train their young through stress rather than shelter. They encode resilience into stories, rituals, and games. Even their entertainment simulates danger, loss, and sacrifice. To us, this seemed barbaric. In truth, it was preparation. The galaxy's mistake was assuming that a species capable of deep compassion must therefore be gentle. Humans disprove that assumption entirely. They are gentle by choice, not by limitation. That distinction matters. I fear humans not because they are violent, but because they are patient, because they will negotiate, endure, and compromise long after others would have retaliated. Because when they finally decide enough is enough, the decision is not reversible. Anger can be appeased. Pride can be negotiated. Fear can be exploited. Conviction cannot. The most unsettling projections we ran did not involve human expansion or conquest. They involved scenarios where humans were repeatedly forced to intervene, again and again, in defense of others. Each intervention justified, each escalation reluctant, each compromise eroded. Eventually, restraint failed. Not explosively, systemically. The simulations did not show humans becoming tyrants.
They showed humans becoming guardians, enforcers of boundaries on a galactic scale, not because they desired power, but because no one else would act. A galaxy policed by human ethics is not a galaxy at peace. It is a galaxy under judgment. That is what terrifies us. I do not fear a human fleet appearing in orbit with weapons primed. That would be obvious, manageable, temporary. I fear the quiet moment when humans decide they are responsible, when restraint finally gives way not to rage, but to duty. Because when humans act out of duty, they do not stop until the threat is gone, not suppressed, not contained, gone. The Academy taught us what one human child could do in 30 seconds. The Council taught us what humanity could do if forced to choose.
And as I look at the galaxy now, fractured, unjust, and perilously confident in its old hierarchies, I find myself haunted by a single question. How many lines can be crossed before human restraint breaks everywhere at once? When that moment comes, there will be no announcement, no warning, only action. And by the time the galaxy understands what has happened, it will already be living with the consequences. Legends usually begin with fire. This one began with silence. The incident at the Neutral Academy was never officially named. No plaque marked the corridor. No memorial recorded the moment. Administrators preferred to let it dissolve into rumor, softened by time and bureaucracy. But stories do not require permission to survive. They spread anyway. Among students, the account changed with each retelling. Details sharpened or blurred, timelines stretched, motives were invented. But one truth remained constant. A human child had ended a threat in seconds and chosen not to finish it. That detail never changed. Human students were not bullied after that, not openly, not subtly. Dominance displays ceased as if erased by decree. Apex youths learned to step aside instinctively. Herbivores watched with new caution. Predators recalibrated. No human demanded this. They simply existed differently afterward. Some aliens avoided them entirely, crossing corridors early or adjusting schedules to minimize contact. Fear, I learned, does not always manifest as aggression. Often it becomes distance. Others took the opposite approach, seeking human companionship cautiously, as if proximity itself offered protection. Both responses were telling. Humans accepted them all. They did not isolate, they did not posture, they did not remind anyone of what had happened. They formed friendships, studied together, laughed softly in common spaces. Life continued, on their terms. The Academy's culture shifted in ways policy could never achieve. Instructors intervened sooner. Power dynamics flattened. Respect replaced hierarchy not because it was mandated, but because it was earned. Years passed. The galaxy changed, slowly and unevenly. Humans expanded their presence. Treaties were signed. Reclassifications formalized. The Academy itself became a case study cited in countless sociological briefings. And yet, the human girl faded from attention. She graduated quietly. No accolades marked her departure. No interviews followed. Her academic record remained solid but unremarkable. She did not pursue military training. She did not seek authority. She vanished into adulthood. I saw her again years later on a diplomatic station orbiting a binary star. She was older, taller, her movements relaxed and unhurried. She wore civilian attire, her posture open, her expression calm. She was laughing with a group of mixed-species colleagues, her laughter unguarded, genuine, kind. I almost did not recognize her. When I did, a chill passed through me, because nothing about her suggested threat.
She radiated approachability. She listened more than she spoke. When disagreements arose, she mediated gently, guiding others toward compromise with practiced ease. This was not an act. This was who she had always been. At one point, our gazes met across the concourse. Recognition flickered briefly in her eyes, then softened into polite acknowledgement. She inclined her head respectfully. No hostility, no expectation. Later, against my better judgment, I approached her. I referenced the Academy. Her smile did not fade. "I remember," she said simply. That was all. No elaboration, no justification, no pride, no bitterness. She did not recount the incident, did not frame herself as victor or victor. She spoke instead of her work, her colleagues, her hopes for cooperative futures. She asked me about mine. The past remained untouched. As we parted, I understood something with devastating clarity. Humans do not relive their violence. They remember it. Memory to them is not nostalgia. It is not fixation. It is a quiet archive of lessons learned, boundaries defined, lines drawn. They do not need to speak of what they are capable of. They have already proven it, to themselves. That is humanity's greatest weapon. Not their strength, not their fleets, not their weapons. Memory. The Academy incident became legend because it did not repeat itself. The human girl did not need to demonstrate her capacity again. Neither did any other human. The lesson had been delivered once, cleanly, and filed away. The galaxy learned it too late. We assumed power needed to be displayed constantly to be maintained. Humans proved the opposite. True power, once revealed, does not need reinforcement. It lingers in the collective consciousness, shaping behavior long after the moment has passed. I often think back to that corridor, the bright lights, the careless laughter, the invisible line crossed without thought. I think of how close we came to far worse outcomes, how narrowly catastrophe was avoided. And I wonder how many similar moments exist now across the galaxy, how many quiet slights, how many unseen pressures, how many lines approaching their limit. Humans endure longer than any species we know, but endurance is not infinite. When humans remember, they adapt. When they adapt, they survive. And when survival demands action, they do not forget the lessons already learned. The lesson we learned too late was not that humans can be violent. It was that they choose not to be. And choice, backed by capability, is the most dangerous force the galaxy has ever encountered. Because the next time humans are forced to teach that lesson, there may be no silence afterward. Listen closely, all who traverse the stars. I speak as one who has witnessed the small and soft become the defining force of a galaxy too arrogant to measure it. Humans are not conquerors. They do not seek dominion for pride, nor wealth, nor glory. They do not crave allegiance, tribute, or fear.
Their ambition is quieter, more subtle, and infinitely more terrifying. They protect what cannot be protected otherwise. I have observed them across worlds. I have catalogued their successes and their failures. I have studied the damage inflicted when boundaries are tested. It is precise, efficient, and final. And I have learned this, should you fail to heed it. Humans do not forget. They do not forgive indiscretion. They do not escalate for sport, but when compelled, their response is decisive. You cannot negotiate past their conviction. You cannot intimidate them into compliance. You may only avoid their ire or suffer the consequences. Every species that has interacted with humans now understands this truth in one form or another. Some adapt, some keep distance, some approach carefully, seeking friendship and alliance. All respect the line, whether spoken or silent. Those who do not are marked in memory, and when humans act, it is not to punish lightly, but to enforce the laws of survival they carry into every interaction. Take this as law, though not one written in stone or decreed by council. It is older than any treaty and sharper than any weapon. Do not violate the boundaries humans hold sacred. Do not harm their young. Do not mock their loyalty. Do not presume weakness where none exists. One mistake is enough. One misjudgment can unravel generations of civilization. They are guardians, not aggressors. Protectors of thresholds the galaxy should never challenge. They measure risk differently. They weigh ethics, endurance, and empathy as if they were tools of survival. And when the time comes, they act, and their action is absolute. I warn you now, not as a scholar, not as a chronicler, but as one who survived witnessing the collapse of arrogance before the smallest human hand. Treat humanity with the care you would a living law. Overstep, test, violate, and you will learn, as we did too late, that restraint is not absence of power, it is power waiting. The stars are vast, but every line has its keeper. Humans are those keepers, and they do not forget. In the end, humans are not a threat. That is the lesson the galaxy struggled to learn, and one we still resist fully, even now. They do not dominate for pride, conquest, or greed. They endure, and in enduring, they teach us something we had long forgotten.
that true strength is measured not by the power you wield over others, but by what you defend, even when defense costs everything. I have observed humans in countless settings: battlefields, research stations, crowded habitats, diplomatic chambers, and always the same pattern emerges. They do not escalate without reason. They do not strike with cause. Their violence is measured, precise, and almost ritualized, like a predator who understands instinct but restrains it for purpose.
But when a line is crossed, when the vulnerable are threatened, when injustice is inflicted, humans act with a decisiveness that leaves even the most experienced predators paralyzed in awe. It is not fear they inspire, it is respect. The galaxy has tried to catalog it. We have built models, run simulations, and analyzed behavioral matrices. All fail. Humans are not predictable. They do not follow simple curves or hierarchical algorithms. Their resilience and restraint defy calculation. They absorb suffering and convert it into action. They form alliances with empathy as the engine, endurance as the frame, and moral clarity as the guide. What other species call courage, humans call obligation. What we call rage, they call response. What we see as chaos, they organize into protection. And when we look to the stars, hoping for guardians, we find them quietly among the soft, the small, the overlooked. We once feared monsters in the shadows of our own arrogance. We expected claws, teeth, and fire. Instead, we discovered protectors. They remind us that power does not demand cruelty, that survival does not require tyranny, and that courage often wears the face of kindness. We feared monsters. Instead, we found protectors.